Just briefly, a few facts about Orchid. I think most of us know who we are and have attended a couple of webinars in the last few months. But just briefly, we have over 5,000 Sage 300 sites in over 60 countries, running on average 2 of our modules per site, supported by over 400 Sage business partners. And in the last day, we've had attendees from various countries attending the webinars, from Thailand, Malaysia, Australia, New Zealand, Tanzania, Bahrain, Botswana, South Africa, the UK, a few other countries. So welcome this morning to our attendees, primarily from the USA and Canada and the Caribbean. We're based in Sydney, Australia. We've won over 10 industry awards in the last few years, including most recently the Sage Australia Development Partner of the Year. We have developed 13 integrated modules that focus on improving efficiency, productivity, and collaboration among Sage 300 users. And by integrated, we mean that all our modules are developed in the Sage 300 SDK. So they have the Sage 300 look and feel. They're easier for users to learn. They dump and load. When you dump and load your database, they will work with other third-party modules for Sage 300. And we've been in business for over 25 years. Our 13 modules are grouped roughly in these 5 categories. So these are the key business needs that they address: collaboration and intelligence with Info Explorer, our business intelligence tool; notes and document management, which let you attach documents and notes to any Sage 300 screen in a very easy to configure manner; automation and productivity will be the focus of today's presentation, with Process Scheduler to schedule and automate some key tasks that relate to Sage 300, as well as Report Runner to automate the running and distribution of crystal reports and financial reports in Sage 300. To tailor your system and your integration and customize Sage 300 to your business needs, we have extender and optional tables, which we will be presenting in more detail in a couple of weeks. And data views we will touch on today, which focus on helping you create SQL views to flatten Sage 300 optional fields and make it easier to use in custom reports. Streamlining financial processes, we've got EFT processing that most of you are familiar with for electronic funds transfers, as well as inter-entity trade, inter-entity transactions to facilitate transactions across companies and across entities. In operations management, we've got return material authorizations and bin tracking to track stock within bin within Sage inventory control without having a full-blown warehouse management system. Okay, so let's start with a few key points about Process Scheduler, Report Runner, and data views that we'll demonstrate in more details today. Process Scheduler is designed to automate repetitive tasks. So if you have staff that spend a lot of time starting recurring processes like data integrity checks, backup, day-end processing, posting batches, and that sometimes run them during business hours, which may lead to performance degradation and time wasted waiting for things to happen, then you can look at Process Scheduler to automate some of these tasks, run them unattended during off-peak hours at a time that's suitable, and be notified when the task's complete or if something goes wrong, depending on a flexible configuration. So with Process Scheduler, you can automate some important repetitive tasks within one Sage 300 company or across multiple ones. So that means that you know that these key processes will run unattended, saving you some time, and send you some configurable email notifications with the detailed logs so that you know what's happened and, more importantly, you know what hasn't happened. So it helps you utilize your resources a bit more efficiently out of peak hours. There's 3 levels of functionality within Process Scheduler. Level 1 is focused on running data integrity, refreshing crystal reports, refreshing Info Explorer cubes, sending some update notifications relating to Sage 300 product updates, running extender scripts. Level 2 includes all of level 1 tasks, plus tasks around the end and posting system batches, ready to post batches in subledgers, as well as in the GL. Level 3 includes level 1, level 2, and more advanced actions, including running custom EXE, custom AVB, running financial report runner, which we'll look at more details today, and running some automated tasks across companies within the GL, like opening and closing fiscal year and fiscal periods. Just a brief look and feel about Process Scheduler. As you can see, it looks like a Sage 300 application. You have your schedule there with detailed tasks going across multiple companies, and this is a sample of some of the actions that you can have around posting transactions, and here it's about running GL opening and closing fiscal periods. Report Runner is focused on managing Crystal and financial reports. So if you have staff that spend a lot of time setting up reports, running them for different parameters, the same every week, every month, and distributing them by emails to various people across the organization, saving snapshots at certain times of the year on the first day of the month, and spending time, wasting time, finding the reports that they need, not being sure which one is the latest one, then Report Runner is a good candidate for you, your clients. It helps you improve the efficiency and improve the data security because you can group your reports in meaningful manner, making it easier to launch, making sure that the relevant users have access to the reports that they need within Sage 300. Some of the key features include that you can automatically run and distribute groups of Crystal reports, both standard Sage 300 reports and custom Crystal reports, and GL Reporter financial reports. So it makes running the reports simpler because the management of the parameters can happen in the background with customizable menus within Sage 300. So you can have finders that look like a Sage 300 finder rather than a standard Crystal one, and you can hide some parameters if you always want to put the same values for certain users in certain parameters. Within the custom Crystal reports, you can have security groups, so each user can have a tailored view with the reports that they actually need. And you can save the reports that you run all the time, making it easier to run them. A sample of what it looks like. On the left-hand side here, we've got Financial Report Runner, which groups different GL reports like your balance sheet and income statement for Division 1, followed by some consolidated reports. Then when I run them, I can select one or a group of them and run them all in one go and save them in my saved run with the parameters that are always used. With Crystal reports on the right-hand side, again, you can group them in configurable groups. In this case, it's been set up with AP reports and AR reports. I can see that the finders look like a Sage 300 finder where I can select my vendor based on criteria within Sage 300. And I can schedule these reports to say, okay, this one is going to run daily, another one could run weekly. Configure what is going to be the output destination. So is it going to be an Excel file, a PDF, where I'm going to save these reports, and send an email to a user with the output of that report. Then I can use Process Scheduler to automate the actual sending of the report. Data views is often used in conjunction with Report Runner because it's focused on turning Sage 300 optional fields into columns for reporting. So if you make use of Sage 300 optional fields and you find it a little bit tedious to incorporate your optional fields into your reports, then data views can be really helpful because it will help you create a SQL view, a database view within Sage 300 to turn your optional fields into columns. So that simplifies your report writing and make it easier to run those reports. So basically what data views does is help you create automatically a SQL view where your optional fields become columns. So you don't need Crystal sub-reports. You can add the field straight into the report as a group in the report. The view can be created once and can be used in multiple reports. The script for that database is stored within Sage 300, so although the view itself will not dump and load, if you have dumped and load or moved to another server, the script is saved within Sage 300 and you can quickly recreate that view within the database. So now let's have a look at it all in action. So we're going to start with data views because it's then used in some reports that we're going to attach to Report Runner, and then we'll focus on Process Scheduler, which helps you run these reports. Data views is part of the Information Manager suite of products, and to configure it, you go into Info Manager Setup, InfoSet Codes. So for the purpose of this demonstration, we're going to look at a view on vendor and vendor optional field. So we've got one in here called EBVend, and if you get your sample data, the Orchid sample data from our website, you'll see that these infosets are set up with the view ready to be used, focused here on AP vendor. So on the database view tab, I've set up a code called EBVend, which is going to be the name of the SQL view that is going to be created in the database. And if I click on this little Go button here, it asks me if I want to create that view. Yes. And what it does is write the SQL script joining the APVend table, so the vendor table, with all the optional fields that are associated to APVend within my Sage 300 database. So this is a view script saved within Sage 300. Now, if I actually want to create the database view in SQL, I need to check my database connection in here. So if you download the sample data, you would need to put in your SQL connection to your database in here. Then you can come here and create the view. If you have already created the view but added some new optional fields, you would first drop the view, say yes to this, and then recreate it through the script. So in the background, what this has done is drop the SQL view from my database and added it back with a new script that I've saved. Now what I can do is use this view in a custom Crystal report, any other report writer that may use the view, any other program that may use the view, or Info Explorer Cube. For the purpose of this example, we will look at a custom Crystal report, a very basic one that I've done based on vendors and the optional field called UPS. So if you see here, in my table, I've got two tables, the APVend and the EBVend, which includes, in this particular case, it includes all the AP fields. And at the bottom here, I've got all the optional fields configured in my database on AP vendor. So UPS zone is the one that I'm showing in here. And I've got org field, which is a new one that was added for the purpose, in our sample data. You can just drag it here and add it to here, and I'm using it here as well as a group to my report. So that shows you how easy it is to use the optional field within a Sage 300 report. So now that we've created our report, we're going to, I'm going to save this. We're going to look at Report Runner and see how we can use these reports more and distribute them more efficiently. So one nice way to get going with Report Runner is to use the visual process flows. You may need to assign them within administrative services, assign visual process flow for our users to see them. And this one includes both configuration setup options for Report Runner and how to run them and how to schedule them through Process Scheduler. So if you need to use security groups within Report Runner, you would set up some security groups in admin services and different users in different groups. And then the main option to configure in Report Runner is on this tab in Info Manager Options, which is your custom directories. This one needs to be the same as the customization directory that you set up within admin services in Sage 300 for Report Runner to know where to pick up your reports. So if you download our sample data, you may need to resave this and resave it in your customization directory. And then if you're going to use Report Runner to email some reports, you need to configure your SMTP server here with the usual details so that you can email. So we don't need to change that for here. So that's the options in here. And then I can go into my analytical reports and see the reports that have already been configured in here and add some new ones. So for example, here I'm logged in as admin, so I can access any report. I've got my accounts payable reports, which include different types of reports. So standard Sage 300 report, like this batch control. We'll come back to MP vendor aging. Custom crystal report, like the vendor list with optional fields that we looked at just now. An EFT vendor details, so that runs off a Sage 300 module from Orchid EFT. With AP vendor aging and in the AR reports group, the customer aging, there are reports that in Sage 300 require temporary table, which we can't run from Report Runner. But what we've done is included in Info Manager a custom vendor aging and a custom customer aging report that you can attach to a Report Runner. You can run data pipe type of reports. You may need to and I don't think we have one in there, but you may then need to add the DLL that's behind the data pipe into the customization directory, and we've got some knowledge-based article on how to do that, and we're always happy to help if there's a specific one that you want to add and have some concerns about it. So one of the advantage of using Report Runner is you can pre-configure a lot of the parameters. So for example, in here, if I edit this report, you can see that out of the box, this report has a lot of parameters. A lot of them have been set to hidden because when I run this one from Report Runner, I'll always want these fields to be set to whatever these values are. And the only thing I want the users to be able to select is this, the batch number. So I just want them to select the batch that they're running that they're going to run the batch control for. So when I look at, so when I click print to actually run this one, all I can see is batch number. I can come here, select which batch that I want to run the report for. So you've all seen batch control report run before, so I'm going to run it for you just now. But what I'm going to do is add another group and another report within that group. So to add a group is very simple. You just select one of these blank areas in here and say add a section. Call it webinar 3, since it's the third round of the webinar on the Report Runner. And within that section, I'm going to add a new report. Select a file, which in this case, I've saved my custom reports in here in a temporary folder. And this is the one we were looking at earlier on. When I add this report, Report Runner will copy this into the customization directory and then refresh the parameters that exist on that report. In this case, I've only got one, which is the vendor group. I can adjust the description of my report, change its default orientation, change how I'm going to show the parameters at the top of the report when I run them, and select a security group. So in this case, we've got up to 26 security groups from A to Z, so it's pretty extensive. In this case, I'm going to say that this report is going to be part of security group B. So any user that is part of security group B will see this report. Any user that's not part of it will not see it when they go to Report Runner. If I don't leave anything checked, all users will see that report. Save this, and then I'm going to configure this parameter. So it's a vendor group, and I want the users to be prompted to enter this parameter when they run the report, but I don't want them to have to go and remember which are the valid vendor groups. So I'm going to change this input type to be a text box finder. And as you can see, I've got different report type, parameter type, which relate to different types of values that you might want to pass to the report from Sage 300, and could be a fiscal period picker, date picker, fiscal year, fiscal period, or just a period picker. In this case, I want it to be a finder. So I'm going to choose text box finder, set the default value, for example, my INV, inventory customer group, and then configure my finder. So it's an AP report and I want vendor group, so I just need to find the vendor group in here. This will show me all the views that have been activated in that database when I click refresh. Then I configure which columns I want to see in the finder. So I want to see the group code, the description, the status, maybe the account set, and any other field that exists on that vendor. I can click test to see what columns are going to show. And as you can see, it looks exactly like a standard Sage 300 finder. So choose that, save it. And then finally, I need to configure what field is going to be returned from report runner to the report when it's being refreshed. And in this case, it's the vendor group. Save this, close. Now I can save this report. Close this. And now I've got my Webinar 3 AP vendor list that's been attached to report runner. If you do a standard Sage 300 report, exactly the same process. Now from here, I can print this report. And as you can see, it's prompting me to select a vendor group. It's defaulted to INV, what I've entered. And I can click the finder to select another vendor group. In this case, let me choose this one. Click select, print. And when I do that, it's now refreshed my my report. I can also save as to save this new default parameter of SVC, or I can choose to schedule the report. So when I schedule, I'm going to tick that box, select the next time that needs to be run at, and select the frequency. So let's say I want this one to be a daily report, and I want to save a snapshot of that report every time I run it. So I'm going to select my destination, and in this case, I'm saving them in here. So it's going to be, for example, something like this. If I want to overwrite the report every time it's run, I can just leave it like this, then it will overwrite. But in this case, I want a snapshot every time I run it. So I'm going to use this year, month, and date to include that in the name of the report. So YYYY, oops, and DD for the day. We'll start off with that. And I can at the same time send an email. Select my email message, which you can configure in Info Manager setup. And that's going to be an AP report, and select an email address. I'm going to send it to Bill at Sample Company. So I can click OK to save this and run it later, or I can click Run and it should go ahead, save the report with that name in that folder, and send me an email. So it's going to do all this in the background, which may take a few seconds, and we should see email notifications coming up, and we can go and check in the custom reports folder that it's created, that it's going to create something very shortly. Yep. I had to say OK first to make sure that the values were saved. So it's run this report. It's dated the 5th of the 4th, 6:25 a.m. because, as you know, we're based in Sydney, Australia, and we're about to have the sunrise. And I've seen my email come through here, sent to Bill. So this email template has been configured, and the file has been attached to the email. So pretty straightforward. So here I've got all these different groups because I'm logged in as admin. Now, if I want to automate this process and I want these reports to be sent daily without any user intervention, then we would use Process Scheduler to configure the schedule and run that automatically. So for Crystal reports, we need Process Scheduler level 1. And we'll come back to Process Scheduler a bit later, but I'll just show you quickly how that schedule is set up. Got one set up here to run all my Crystal reports across 2 companies. So Orc Ltd, which is the one we're looking at now, but this schedule is also looking at Orc IN2 across another database. And it's configured to send me an email when I've got an error running the schedule. And then if I look at this one in a little bit more detail, it's telling me also to send an email when there's been an error and also send me a notification when it's been successful. Now, from here, I can click run and it will refresh all the reports that have a next run date before today. So anything that was run yesterday will be configured to be run again today. So when I click run, it will refresh all the reports. Now, for the sake of time constraints, I'm not going to do that and go and run the 4 or 5 reports that have been configured. I will just show you that if you want to schedule that automatically, you would then use Task Scheduler to configure a task that runs the schedule. So in this case, I've got a schedule that said, because it's my demo machine, I'm only running it when the user is logged on. But typically on a server, you would run this whether the user is logged on or not. It's triggered in this case daily at 10 a.m. And the action is basically, look at this like this, it'll be easier to see. It's running a program called OZ Integrity Check, which is sitting in the Process Scheduler folder, OZ being the 2-letter code for Process Scheduler, 65A for 2018, 64A for 2017, etc., wherever your SAID 300 programs are running. And here we put the name of the schedule that we want to run. In this example, we're running the schedule to refresh all our Crystal reports at 10 a.m. and it's called Run Reports. So as I said, we'll look at this configuration in more detail a bit later. Now with our report runner, one last thing I wanted to show you is the security group. So now if I log in as user group A, which only has access to other reports that are open to everyone or reports that are ticked as report security group A. And I go into report runner. As you can see, probably need to refresh that with some of the new reports that I've added. But you can see that user group A doesn't have access to webinar 3 because we made that user security group B, so they can't see it. Doesn't have access to any accounts receivable reports either because all those reports belong to group B or C. So it makes it, it avoids the clutter. If they only need to run AP reports and sales reports, that's all they see. And here you can see that the next run date is the 1st of April. So if I run my schedule, all these reports would get refreshed. So we'll log out of user group A and go back to report runner. So that's basically an overview of running report runner to run Crystal reports, standard and custom Crystal reports within SAID 300, and using Process Scheduler level 1 to automatically distribute those reports. Now, the next thing we're going to look at is financial reports. So financial reports also require same options as Crystal reports in terms of your customization directory and your email configuration and your email templates. And then here you run the financial report runner, which is, some users may have access to one and not the other. And what you can see here is that some of your standard GL reports, GL financial reports, have been grouped into meaningful groups: Department 100, Department 200, and here just the income statement, etc. So similar to Report Runner for Crystal, You can add a new group. And within that group, you can add your own report. So I'm going to go to my reports. And in this case, I haven't moved my GL financial reports into the customization directory. So I've got to pick them up here from my GL folder. And let's run this income statement template. I'll give it a description. And if you're familiar with the GL Financial Reporter, which I'm sure most of you are, you'll see that some of the options there are very similar to the ones that you get when you run print financial reports within the GL. You can choose your report type, actual or provisional, choose to run it consolidated or not, and include some of the report options and drill down information. And then you can choose how to sort the report. And for example, in this case, I'm going to do it by division and choose division 100 to 100 because that's what I want to run in here. And I can choose different account groups, etc. So basically very similar to running your GL financial report. So I'm going to save this. And now my report is here ready to be run. So when I click select and print, I can then choose my fiscal year and period. Because it's my sample data, I'm going to choose 2019. And I can choose my print destination. I could print straight to a printer, save as an Excel file or text file if I wanted to. Again, I can save the output somewhere. And I'm going to go back to my custom reports folder, save it in the GL, and it's an income statement for 100. Oops. And here, when similarly to the Crystal reports, I can use the date and time that I'm actually running this report to give it in the output name. But I can also use those two extra variables. The name between curly brackets will give you that description here in Financial Report Runner. So in this one is called Income Statement Div 1. So I could actually replace this with the name, and then put my year, month, and let's say day. And if I use file name, it's going to give it the name of the underlying spreadsheet. So it would be Inc. Sum 02. And I can also configure to send an email, choose my message ID, which in this case, I've only got one to send all my financial reports, and choose an email address. So same thing, I'm going to send it to Bill. I can save this for reuse. And if I choose print, it will run the financial report, open Excel, save the file, and send me an email. So again, for most of you who have probably looked at the GL Financial Reporter a fair number of times, you can see that it's very similar. It opens the FR, runs the report, saves a copy in wherever I told it to save, which was in here, and it's now sent me an email. So it saved it here in the GL folder with the naming convention that I used, and it has sent an email to Bill with my financial report. Go back to here. Now, if I select multiple reports, same thing, I can send all these reports in one go, configure who it's going to go to, what naming it's going to use, but I also set the order, move them up and down as required. So I won't run that for you for the sake of time, but basically you'll do what we looked at for one report, but do it for all of them. So that makes it easier to run these every time you have a month end, or if you want to run your reports for a particular division automatically by just clicking one button, run all your reports and come and look at them all in one go. Now, if you want to schedule this to run automatically and run across multiple companies, you would use Process Scheduler Level 3. So we'll look at this one and look at the one that's been set up in there, Financial Reports. So similar to the other schedule, you can configure it to either not send any email or just send an email when there's been an error with the schedule. And then you can attach multiple actions. This one works a little bit differently in that when I run a financial report group, I actually choose a particular group. So we had Department 100, Department 200, and then my webinar 123. So in this case, I want to run the income statement 200, which I'm running for next fiscal year, next fiscal period, because my sample data is next year. But I could run it as well for current fiscal year or the previous fiscal year. Choose which fiscal period I'm running it for, and choose my format, sort of Excel or text. Add some configuration, email subject, and who is going to receive this email. So, for example, Bill might receive income statement 200, but Susan Promer might receive all the reports relating to Division 100. And then save where the reports are going to be saved, and send me a notification if there's been an issue. So this lets you configure within Process Scheduler who will receive what group, which email address will go to what group of reports. And you can run this, in this case it's Org Ltd, but if I've configured financial reports in my other companies like Org IN2, I can also refresh them all in one go from this schedule. So if I click run, it will go and run all the reports that are part of that group. And then if I want to schedule it automatically to run on the second or the third day of the month, once I've finished all my month-end tasks, I would set up my schedule here in Task Scheduler and either create another schedule that runs the financial report schedule, because this run reports might run daily, but run financial reports might only run weekly or monthly. Okay, so that's the main thing about financial report runner, which basically lets you group your financial reports and resave your criteria. So in this case, I've got my saved runs, which are the ones that I run all the time. So they're all set up in there. You can select whichever one you want, click print, and it will refresh with whatever date you want. Okay, so next, I'll just see, there's a question here. Oops. If I just want to schedule recurring reports, I can do that with Report Runner. Well, yes, with Report Runner, so Bruce, with the scheduling, if you want to run the reports with the same parameters and basically come here and click run for your groups of reports, then you use just Report Runner. But if you want the reports to be emailed automatically or a snapshot of the report to be saved automatically in a particular folder, then you need Report Runner and Process Scheduler Level 1. Hopefully that answers your question, Bruce, but we'll come back to questions at the end. Okay, so the next module we wanted to go through in a bit more detail is Process Scheduler. So we've already had a little look at Process Scheduler in terms of running refreshing reports and crystal reports. But let's go and check the setup of Process Scheduler. So in Process Scheduler, if you download our sample data or when you configure Process Scheduler from scratch, the main starting point is the options, like a lot of other modules. And in Process Scheduler, normally you would activate Process Scheduler only in one company, a main one. And in the options, you would configure which one is that company that you're using Process Scheduler in. We generally recommend that you use a dedicated Sage 300 user to run Process Scheduler because it makes it easier to control the password, make sure it doesn't expire. So here we're using P schedule. So if you download our sample data, you need to create that user, give it some rights, or change to use your own user. And we're here saying that Orc Ltd is the main company that's going to hold all the schedules that we're going to run. And then you need to configure your email SMTP details that will be used by Process Scheduler to send the email. So when you click Run within Process Scheduler, or when you run the Process Scheduler exe from Task Scheduler. And then just a reminder that we've got the Updates tab here that you can get notified when there are new product updates for our modules. And then in companies, you're going to say and give logon details for all the companies that Process Scheduler is going to be doing some work with. In this case, we've configured it for, these are all the companies that I have on this machine, the various Orc entities, and also our SAMINC. So for Orc IN2, I've got my P schedule and the related password associated with that. Then you configure your email messages that are going to be used in the schedule, or you come here and amend some of them as required. And some of the examples in there, as you can see in the email, you can use some variables. The variables that you can use depend on which Process Scheduler action you're running. So there's quite a lot of documentation in the help, and also some of the samples will give you, examples of what variables to use if they're not sitting there in the right-hand side. Got all these details about the company profile, then the schedule that I'm running, and then in some tasks like data integrity, etc., I can attach the detail of the integrity log to the email. So, for example, in here, I'm attaching dollar details, which will attach the data integrity log results, etc. So we'll see how they're used when we look at a few of the schedules that come with the sample data. So the first one is a nice little one that can be used with Process Scheduler Level 1, which is to check disk space. So I'm getting a notification here. Often in Process Scheduler, it's easier to click the Detail tab to see the details, because some of the, depending on which action you choose in here, you may have different parameters to fill in. So for check disk space, I'm saying here, okay, which path am I checking? So here I've only got one machine, so I'm checking the C drive of this machine, but often you'd use UNC path and go and check your application server, your SQL server, any server where you may save documents that are used in document management link, or that are used for other Sage 300 usage, and say if the disk space is less than whatever is appropriate for that machine, then send me an email saying you're running low of disk space. And if you're running, go to the next step, to actually check the disk space on another server. And this is quite useful. I'm sure you've all had experiences of client calling in and having issue with Sage 300 only because they're running low of disk space on their SQL server or on their application server. That's quite easy to set up, and can make job easier for the IT team or for you. So next one in our sample schedule is one called Daily Checks, and basically this one runs some sample extender scripts that are available on the Orchid website on the sample scripts, but you can obviously write your own script. So that is available if you use Extender Customizer or Developer and Process Scheduler Level 1. And some of the examples that we have in here is running these two scripts. The first one basically sends you an email notification when the quantity in location, the IC item quantity is less than the minimum quantity configured in IC. And then the other example we have is basically sending you an email notification when the customer is out of their aging and out of their terms. That would be sent to somebody in accounts. The IC one would go to somebody in the warehouse or somebody in purchasing, so that they can review the stock and possibly order new stock. There's a few other examples that we've looked at in the previous webinars on security and managing by exception. So, for example, sending you an email with large transactions in certain GL accounts that even include a link back to the GL batch in the email. So you get that email notification, one click, and it opens the appropriate Sage 300 GL batch. Database dump. In this example, it's been configured to basically dump those various Orchid databases into those paths here. So you configure which path you want to dump and give it a name. So again, you can use your year month options to, if you don't want to override the file every day, and if you call it .zip, it will actually compress your dump, which will mean which will take less space on the machine where you're doing the dump. Send you an email only if there's been an issue doing the dump, so the user doesn't have access to the path or couldn't connect to the database or something like this. And on success, you don't really need a notification because you're going to see the file popping up in that folder. And then it's doing that across all the companies that I want to use. So dump is say a process schedule level 1. If I want to load automatically, that is process schedule level 3. So if I wanted to load automatically into a test or a mirror server every day, I could do that with process scheduler level 3. Now we're moving on to the end and system batches type of actions with process scheduler level 2. So as you can see quickly at a glance here, I've got those sort of 8 steps numbered 1 to 5, which makes it easier if you just want to add a new step in between subsequently. And for each company, it's doing 2 things: running the D-end and then posting all system batches for those 4 companies. So what we're assuming here, I'm running the D-end, and then if there's an error, I'm going to go to step 10. And step 10 is basically skipping posting the system batches in Orc LTD, because I don't want to be posting those batches if there's been an issue with the D-end. And I'm going to go straight to trying to run the D-end in the next company. But if I'm successful in running the D-end, I'm going to then post all system batches in that company and then move on to step 10, which is running the D-end in the next company, etc. for those 4 companies. And if I look at the detail in here, you can see that the log file would then get attached in there. So you have all these logs saving away automatically where you need to, which is really useful from an audit point of view. Now, data integrity, we will look at 2 ways of configuring data integrity in Process Scheduler. So in this example, we're running the data integrity across these 3 companies, and we're also clearing the data integrity logs. So let's look at it in a bit more detail for one of the companies. So the action here is check all modules integrity. And what Process Scheduler is doing is looking at all the modules that are active in the company that we're looking at and running the data integrity for all those modules. So this is obviously a bit quicker to configure. If a new module gets activated, it will be picked up automatically by the data integrity check. The only I guess, disadvantage of this one is that within Process Scheduler, when I look at the last log, I'm only seeing the last module that has been run. So in this case, it's going to be the tax data integrity. All my logs are still sitting there in the log path that I've configured and will be attached to the email if I choose so. But just something to keep in mind when you're using that action. Here I've configured it to send me an email only when there's an on change of error. And what this does is only send you an email if there's been a change in the number of data integrity errors. So if you have the same old errors that for whatever reason you can't clear, you don't want to be notified every day that these old errors are there, because then you learn to ignore those exception notifications. But you only get to send an email when it's changed. So when you actually receive this notification on your data integrity, you know that something new has happened and you know you need to investigate. And then I can choose to fix or not fix the errors as per Sage 300 data integrity thing. And then the next step is to clear the old data integrity logs. So in this case, I've said keep them for 90 days, but then after that, when I next run this schedule, clear it. And the same for all the companies that I'm working with. The next way that I can run these schedules is to set it up for each module. So this is how we've configured it in the sample data for Orc Ltd. And what we've done is selected each module. So we choose the check integrity action, which is also part of Process Scheduler Level 1, and then choose which module. So if you only want to run data integrity in IC and purchase order, for whatever reason, then you would use these actions, just run it on IC and PO, and you have the same options. Send an email when there's a change in the number of errors, fix yes or no, where you're going to save your files, and whether you send a summary log or a full log. And then choose your email template. So that's the Process Scheduler for data integrity. This one is also quite nice. You have this schedule that sends you the list of the Sage 300 service packs that are installed. So it's quite nice to make sure that if you install a new product update, run this schedule, send it to yourself, file it away in your sort of CRM system or support system, so that you know which product updates are actually installed on your client site. So it can be part of your business care product or something like this. Now, we have looked at running financial reports from Process Scheduler, so we won't look at that one in detail again. But the next one is to run refresh Info Explorer Cube. So when you run Info Explorer, our business intelligence tool, you can choose to refresh the cubes automatically. With Process Scheduler Level 1, you configure the cube that you want to refresh, and if you have some parameters, you put them in there, and that can include the password parameter that you may have on your cube refresh. So here I've got two cubes that, not sure what's happening with this, which get refreshed with that. And here I'm passing this parameter. I'm running this with an aging date of 2020 and email this email address. And the final one, so okay, we've looked at this one for Crystal Reports, but the final one I want to show you is the ability to run multiple schedules within one schedule. So in this example, we've got a schedule that will run all my report-related schedule. So I've got my Crystal reports in here, I've got my financial reports in here, and my third step will run my Info Explorer cubes. Now, why would you want to do that? Basically, each schedule can be configured with its own way, and it can be a bit easier for you to see rather than have too many steps, too many actions within one schedule. But if you have just one schedule in here that runs multiple schedules, then if they're all going to be run at the same time from Task Scheduler, it lets you only have one task in Task Scheduler that will be run in here. So instead of running multiple tasks in Task Scheduler to run reports, I could change this one to run the run schedule task, which will run all the schedules that have been configured in there. So in some setup, it's actually quite useful to remember that you can run schedule from within Process Scheduler all in one go. So that's the main things we wanted to go through in this presentation. So we'll come back to Process Scheduler. We've still got 5 minutes for questions, so that's great. And while I'm looking at questions and or you're typing some more questions, just does Process Scheduler work with Sage Intelligence? I'll have to defer to one of my colleagues. No, Sage Intelligence doesn't work with Process Scheduler. So I'll just wait, give you some time to type in any questions if required, and I'll just come to a couple of things that, or the main things that we often, the main support queries that we have with Process Scheduler. As you can see, once Process Scheduler is set up, generally it sort of, sits in the background and you don't have to come back to it. So in terms of troubleshooting, there's a couple of things that always happen. Or that not always happen, but the most common support questions that we have relate to my schedule runs here when I'm in Process Scheduler and I click run, but it doesn't work when I run it from Task Scheduler. There's a couple of things with that. You can configure Task Scheduler to generate a log file, and there's a knowledge-based article on that, so we would often refer you to that and send us a log file. And often when you look at the log file, you'll see what the issue is. And the typical things would be that Process Scheduler or the task can't connect to Sage 300, which could be because IAP is turned on that machine and there's no IAP set up on that machine. Or it could be that the user that's running the task doesn't have access to run Sage 300, or that it doesn't have access to the path where the files are being saved, or that the workstation setup hasn't been run on the machine where Task Scheduler is running, or that machine may not have proper access to the email or the SMTP server that's used to email. So the log file will give you a lot of details on what's going on, and this troubleshooting checklist is also on our knowledge base. So I would encourage you to look at that, and then obviously email support if you still have issues. Is there an example? Is there an example to run a custom application in Process Scheduler? In our sample data, I'm not sure, but if we create a new run in here, so if I add a step in here, so to run a custom application would be Process Scheduler level 3. So run program would be in here. So we'll choose a company or LTD, and here you would put the full command line of the path where your program is run. So you'd put the program of your EXE or your AVB if you're running an AVB in here. And if there's any parameters that are required, you'd put them in here. And if you want to send an email on error, you need to pass in your program. You need to pass an error condition to Process Scheduler. There is a knowledge base article on doing that, so I will send that to you separately, or we'll attach that to the recording of the email. So this webinar is being recorded, so we will send you a link to it, and we will send answers to the questions that were asked in the various webinars. Just one last question before we finish. Can you schedule through Report Runner and Process Scheduler email to clients? The short answer is no, as in you can't, within Report Runner, configure an email to go to the customer email address or the customer delivery method set up in AR. If you want to email something to a customer, you would have to set the fixed email address of your customer within Report Runner. So if you need to email something to a customer, you would need to use Extender and a custom script for that. I can't see any other questions, and it is 7 a.m. in Sydney. It is whatever time it is in the afternoon. So I will thank you again for joining this webinar, and enjoy the rest of your day. Thanks. Bye.